So we've talked about the problem finder and we've talked about the buyer analysis. So let's bring these two things together. Let's bring these two things together. And I'm going to show you a model and an exercise that you can do to really pull together problem and buyers to make sure that in fact a deal is qualified. Because remember, this is principle number one, deal qualification. Spend a lot of time on this because if we don't have the right qualification in place, there is no deal. This is the foundation of the rest of the sale. This is all on us. Like, we have to make sure that we have a qualified deal. If we don't have a qualified deal, you don't have a sale, right? So, and I'll get to your question as well in just a minute, Octavian. So the way we want to do to pull this together is we can pull this together in what's called the problem model. So those of you who might still be on the marketing list, we sent an email out this morning about the problem model. And there's 5 P's to the problem model. 5 P's to the problem model. And so the first P is very, very existential. It's an existential question. Right now, how many people see a red dot on the screen? Yes or no? Who sees a red dot? Yeah, you see it, red dot. Now you don't. Now you do. Now you don't. And now you do. So the very first P in this problem model, these are 5 P's. The first P is there a problem? And this goes back to a question that was asked a couple minutes ago. Does your customer, does your prospect know that there is a problem? Do they acknowledge, yes, I have this problem? Not, I told them that we solved this and that problem for people just like them. And they go, oh yeah, okay, that sounds cool. They need to have told us, I have this problem, right? So that's the first P. Is there a problem? Did they say, yes, there is a problem? Nick is saying quantum dot, yes. So that's the first P. The second P is then thinking about this dot and growing some concentric circles. And the reason we want to think about the dot getting bigger and bigger, because now it's not just some small dot. Now it's this huge red dot that's on my screen, right? And that brings us to the second P, which is perception. What is the perception of the problem? Is it just a small problem? Like, yeah, we admit we have this problem, but it's kind of a small problem. Or do they say, oh my gosh, this is a huge problem. If we don't solve this problem, then we're completely screwed. What is the perception of the problem? Small problems, hard to get a sale. Bigger problems, much bigger. Much bigger means bigger problem means bigger opportunity for a sale. So that's the second P, is perception of the problem. The third P that we want to think about is the person. So each buyer type that we just went through, we need to think about them individually and say, this person, who is this person? How are they involved with the sale? There's one person out here. There's another person that could be here in the organization, another person who's way out here. We have different people involved with the sale. We need to make sure we're identifying each of those people. The fourth is then to say, well, you notice these 3 people, one person is really close to the problem. They're actually inside of this big circle. They're in the middle of the fire. They're feeling it every day. And that means the fourth P that we need to think about is proximity. This person is feeling it every day. This person, the proximity out here, they can sort of feel the heat from the fire. Right? If you put your hand inside of a campfire, it's going to burn. If you're standing next to a campfire, you feel the heat, you smell the smoke, and you go, okay, yeah, there's some heat, there's some smoke. That smoke's kind of annoying. The fire's kind of warm. You can feel it. You're close to it. You're somewhat proximate, but you're not in the middle of it. Now, the third person out here, their proximity is really, really far away, right? So even if they say, yes, that's a problem, and yes, that's a big problem, if they're really far away from the problem, then they might have a different view on whether or not we should go forward with the sale. And then the fifth P is perspective. That means, what is their view on how to solve the problem? So we have one person who says, this is my perspective on how to solve it. This person says we should solve it this way. This person says we should solve it this way. Maybe we've got another buyer type out here who says, no, we should actually solve it this way, right? And so what are some of the options when people say, hey, there's different ways, my perspective on how we should solve this problem is different? What are some of the perspectives that the different buyers within one sale may have? Share a couple of those in the chat box. What are some options? What are some things that people are thinking? Thank you, Matt. Problem, perception, person, proximity, perspective. So when you think about the perspective that different buyers have, what are some of the options? What are some of the perspectives that you know? Think about those deals that you're working. Think about one deal in your pipeline. You've talked to 3 or 4 or 5 people within that organization. What have they each said? What are some options that they might consider? What are some perspectives on how to solve that problem? Let me hear from you guys. What have you heard? What's one perspective on how to solve the problem? I'm going to help you out. I'm going to get you started. Number one is they could buy from you, right? Scott Felton, do it ourselves. Yeah, DIY. How hard could it be? We have the applications engineers team over here. They said they could do it, right? DIY, do it ourselves, right? DIY is actually short for dead in a year. That's what DIY means. Roger Lee says, do nothing. Absolutely, do nothing, because change is hard, right? Do nothing-itis, right? You could do nothing. And related to that is delay. They could say, yeah, we want to take action on this, but we thought we were going to do it now, but we're just going to push it out to Q2 or Q never, right? People, Daniel says, hire more people. Yeah, hire. That means could mean consultants, could mean grow the team. So another option is like, hey, instead of buying a solution, we're just going to hire more people to handle the issue. So we've come up with buy from you, do it yourself, do nothing, delay, hire a team. RFP, yeah. We're going to go out to the open market. And related to that, it means they could buy from competitors, right? These are just 6 options that we know could be, oh, we already have someone. Yeah, current vendor, that's a competitor, right? So when you think about this problem model and these 5 Ps, and we're bringing together problem, right? We have to find the problem, and we know we have these buyers. This model brings it all together for you. So as you're analyzing your pipeline, you say, okay, is there a problem? Number one. And number two, for each buyer, what is their perception of the problem? Do they know the problem is there? How big is it? Is there a problem? How big is the problem? Who is the person that we're talking about and analyzing? What is that person's proximity to the problem? Are they feeling it every day? Are they kind of in the middle? Or are they way far away? And then finally, what is each buyer's perspective on how the problem could and should be solved, right? So let me just do a quick pause here. As you look at this model, what's most useful as you're thinking about bringing together the problem and the buyers into one place? What's most useful for you as you look at this model and think through analyzing your deals with this model? Let me hear from a couple people we haven't heard from in a while. Daniel saying proximity because perception is reality. Proximity is important, right? Because somebody that might be more motivated to spend time on a project to evaluate a replacement or be willing to engage in the transaction of changing from one to another. If they're closer to it versus somebody else, they're like, yeah, I really don't want to get involved with that project right now. Like, I got all this other stuff to do. I know it's a problem for those guys, for that unit or for that team. But like, if I have to do a bunch of meetings, I don't know if I really want to deal with that right now. Perception is reality. In a lot of cases, yeah. Like if people say, look, it's not a big problem, then we have a decision to make. How much education do we want to do? How much time do we want to spend to help that person understand, like, well, maybe you're thinking it's a small problem, but let me show you how it could be a big problem. Daniel saying proximity. Daniel Filster saying proximity. Haven't thought about that. Yeah, it's just different people spending their willingness to spend time based on how it's affecting them. Because if I'm this person out here, I'm pretty far away to this. I like to think about this as being kind of like a fire. Here's all the fire, and here's all the smoke coming out of that fire. That's the problem for these guys over here. But this person, right? They might have their own stuff going on. They might have their own problem that they're in the middle of that's completely unrelated to anything that you do. Maybe it's the CFO of the company you're selling to. They're really far away from the problem that you solve, but they got their own problems that they're dealing with. Like maybe they're going through an audit right now, or maybe they're changing their entire accounting team, or maybe as the CFO, he's working directly with the IT people to do a cost benefit analysis to outsource to Amazon now. There's going to be all these other things that CFO is working on that they're feeling the heat on over here. So like, I got this thing I'm working on over here. Like that one, I know it's a big problem for them, but it's pretty far away from me, right? And that is saying perception. Yeah, people need to accept not just is there a problem, but how big is this problem? Because that's going to dictate how much time and effort they're willing to spend to solve it. If it's a big problem, be willing to spend more time. If it's a small problem, maybe not as much. Roger's asking, is the problem big enough of a problem for the org to invest? I guess my statement's more about proximity. Well, I think it comes down to like, hey, there's lots of problems in companies. Like companies, just lots of people, lots of layers, lots of problems. But the question is that problem that you solve big enough for them to spend time on it? I've told a story a couple of times where I was at a lending company years ago. I was in a room full of executives, and they were detailing in a whiteboard how many different places where they could use our workflow software at Blend. And they were just like throwing stuff up on a board, trying to figure out, okay, this business unit here and that business unit there, and what about over this? We had a list, and one of the executives said, hey, what about this? And they named the problem. And the chief risk officer looked at him and said, that's only a $10 million problem right now. So this is not a focus. And I was sitting there like, oh my God, it's only a $10 million problem, but big organization, big problems, $10 million problem for them, small problem versus the other problems that they had that were $50 and $100 million problems. Sean's saying it frames the entirety of an approach to understanding the potentials that a prospect face in addressing the issue. Yeah, for sure. So if we think about like, how do you put this to work? If you go, oops, what about that? Oh, don't get dizzy. There is, guess what? A worksheet. And so this is the problem model worksheet. And so what I've done is I've collected these 5 factors, right? So you have the way to use this is say, here's my account. I'll use the Wells Fargo example again. So Wells Fargo is my account. Now here I have my different buyers for that account. So that's the people, number one. And then as you're analyzing your pipeline, you have to ask yourself quickly, okay, does this person know, yes, there is a problem, or are they problem unaware? They just not realize that this is an issue with their company, or they don't willing to accept it. Secondly, perception. What is their perception? Is this a small problem, a medium problem, or a big problem? And you just fill in the circle based on how small, medium, or large the perception of that person, the perception that that person has around the problem. And so as you detail this, you might see, okay, we've got something like this in our account. So we got 3 key buyer types. You're thinking this is a small problem. Only one person thinks it's a big problem. Got some work to do to figure out whether or not this deal is real, right? Because just because this one person says it's big doesn't mean there's a sale, right? Or you might find that you have 3, key stakeholders, and maybe you do this with 10, depending on how big the account is. Maybe you've got 3 people that have really big perception of the problem is like really big. You got one person who says like, it's a small problem. Well, now we have to devise a strategy to go to speak with that person, whether it's using the other people on the team, the customer's team, or directly talk to that person saying, this is really interesting, because when we talk to the 3 or 4 other people involved, they're all telling us this is really affecting their work every day. It seems like from your perspective, this is actually kind of a small problem. Can you tell me more about that? Why is that? So this is just designed to help you get a visual on the different buyers and whether or not they have a small, medium, or large perception of the problem. Proximity. same thing. So for these buyer types, are they close? Are they feeling the heat every day? Are they close to the fire? Are they kind of closer but not too close? Are they kind of far away, or are they way out here in the distance? Again, this is just it's a way for you to visually look at each deal and figure out, okay, do we have one person who is really close to the problem every day, but all the other buyers are kind of far away? They're not proximate to it. And maybe this person is the same person that said this is a big problem, and these three all said it's a small problem. So again, from a qualification standpoint, we got to figure out whether or not this deal is real or not. And then finally, what is the perspective? And I listed a couple of things that we had charted out. You know, buy from us. Is the different buyers' perspective? Buy from us, buy from somebody else, do nothing, delay, hire, whatever that is. And so this problem model worksheet is designed for you to analyze your pipeline and say, okay, well, let me visually look and bring together the problem piece and the buyer piece and figure out where people stand relative to the problem that we solve with our product. So let me just pause there, because that was, you know, I was planning to spend a ton of time on this because this is the number one thing. This is the foundation for everything else. If we don't do this right, if we don't have this, we don't have a deal. And this is why we have to start here wherever you're analyzing your pipeline. What is the problem? Are they the right customer? Who are the buyers? And once we know those things, making sure that we're really clear about their perception of the problem, how proximate they are, what their perspective is, because that will inform us as to whether or not this deal is real and there's urgency, or there's not. So any questions on this before we go to principle number 2? The other ones will go a little bit faster. I want to, again, spending a lot of time on this because most pipeline pileup is simply because we haven't done a good job of qualifying the lead in the first place. If you guys are good with this, give me a good to go, thumbs up, a fist bump, one of these things. I don't know what they're called. You know, Dan Filster says GTG, good to go. Scott Filton, how do you connect third-person problems? I think I need to understand more about what your question is here. Oh, I did want to go back because Sean has asked the question: how do you go back to those prospects without annoying them? How does this translate to the cold calling process? So when you're thinking about the map of your buyers, we're going to get into some of this in just a minute. Annoying means that you're not adding value. If you're annoying somebody, you're actually detracting from their experience, right? On the other hand, if you're contacting somebody and you're sharing information, you're helping them, you're adding value, then it's not annoying at all. I'm actually glad that somebody gets in touch with me if they're adding value to me. So first of all, get a lay of the land, make sure you know who your buyers are. Then the next couple principles that we're going to go through, Sean will talk through how do you have those conversations, how do you engage with those people, how do you add value so that you can uncover the rest of what we're trying to do here in this first step, okay? Roger is also asking, oh, we talked about this in the CBI. Okay, cool. All right, says Steve. Problem that the economic, Scott found the problem the economic doesn't experience directly, but they experience secondary effect of. That's usefully saying. Octavian is asking, when will you discuss on how you might fix the proximity problem? You can't fix the proximity problem. There's nothing to fix about, you know, we can't necessarily say, oops, you know, if this CFO is way out here and they're not proximate to the problem, then it's simply our job to keep them informed, keep them educated, and let them know that, hey, this other team is having this issue. We're going to need your approval. We're going to need your perspective on this. We're going to need you to agree that it makes sense to go to the next steps of the sale, so that in a way you're sort of project managing for that CFO. So that's our job to make sure that we're keeping in touch with all of those buyer types, which is why here in this buyer analysis worksheet, even if somebody's not proximate to the problem, but we know that person that's not proximate is the economic buyer, it's our job to make sure that we've identified that person, that we've had contact with that person, we're keeping that person informed about the progress we're making with the rest of the team.